When millionaire Dona Isadora passed away, she was holding her will in her arms, a final message of love and wisdom. Her children, anxious and apprehensive, arrived to divide the inheritance she had left them. What seemed like a moment of celebration quickly turned into a painful test of character and integrity. They were about to discover that Dona Isadora's true inheritance was not just money, but a series of challenges designed to reveal the true essence of each one. Prepare yourself for a story of tension and revelations, where greed and honesty clash in unexpected ways. How would her children react when the fate of her inheritance was at stake? Are you ready to follow this exciting journey and discover what really matters when everything is at stake? Before we begin, make sure you are already subscribed to our channel. I will be very happy to have you with me always. Dona Isadora, a woman who was not only known for her enormous wealth, but also for her generous and wise heart. She owned a beautiful mansion high on a hill, surrounded by lush gardens and sparkling fountains. Her children, Marcos, Anna, and Julia, grew up under the shade of these magnificent trees and in the luxurious hallways of the house, enjoying a life of comfort and privilege. Dona Isadora loved her 3 children deeply, but over the years she realized that wealth did not automatically guarantee wisdom or kindness. She worried that, as they were pampered by the life of luxury, they might forget important values such as honesty and fairness. To ensure that they learned these valuable lessons, she decided to prepare a very special surprise. She dedicated herself to creating a will not only to distribute her assets, but also to teach them a great lesson. With the help of her trusted lawyer, Mr. Pedro, Dona Isadora planned a series of challenges that would be revealed after her departure. These challenges were not only tests of character, but opportunities for her children to show who they really were. Each of the challenges was carefully designed to test her children's honesty, integrity, and kindness. Dona Isadora wanted her children to discover the true value of generosity and fairness by facing these trials. She believed that these experiences could shape their character more profoundly than any material inheritance could. So when preparing her will, Dona Isadora sat with Mr. Pedro in his elegant study, surrounded by old books and precious objects. With a quill pen and ink, she wrote down each detail with care and consideration, ensuring that each challenge was fair and meaningful. The will was filled with love and wisdom, and she knew that her last words would be a legacy that would help shape her children's future. When the time came to read the will, Dona Isadora had already passed away, but her presence was still felt in every corner of the house. Marcos, Anna, and Julia, now adults, gathered at the mansion, their hopes and expectations mixed with sadness for their loss. They were about to discover the surprise that Dona Isadora had prepared for them, and with it, the opportunity to prove their true character. The story was about to unfold, and each of them was about to face a challenge that would test not only their skills, but also their souls. When Dona Isadora passed away, the news spread quickly, and the mansion that had once been a place of celebration and joy was now shrouded in a pall of sadness. The house, with its walls adorned with old paintings and luxurious tapestries, seemed to reflect the family's mourning. Her children, Marcos, Anna, and Julia, were about to face a new stage in their lives, and the anticipation of their mother's legacy mixed with the pain of their loss. The atmosphere in the large living room was one of nervous anticipation. The room was elegantly decorated, but the mood was tense and anxious. Marcos, always the most impetuous, paced back and forth, his thoughts racing at 1,000 miles an hour. Anna, the most analytical, observed the details meticulously, trying to guess what might be coming. Julia, the calmest and most focused of the 3, sat serenely, but her eyes betrayed curiosity and nervousness. On that gloomy morning, Mr. Pedro, Dona Isadora's lawyer and the guardian of her last will and testament, entered the room with a solemn air. His presence brought an aura of formality that made the hearts of the 3 children beat faster. He carried a dark leather briefcase, and when he opened it, he revealed an old, yellowed envelope, Dona Isadora's will. The sound of the paper being unfolded seemed to echo throughout the silent room. The children gathered around, anxious to know how the inheritance would be divided. They expected the reading to reveal a simple division of the assets: the mansion, the cars, the jewelry. However, what they were about to hear would change their lives forever. Mr. Pedro began to read in a deep and clear voice, each word carrying the weight of Dona Isadora's intentions. "My dear children," the will began, The inheritance I leave you will not be divided in any way. Instead of distributing my assets directly, I have prepared 2 challenges that will test your honesty and kindness. Only those who prove their true character will be able to inherit the legacy I have built throughout my life." Dona Isidora's words hung in the air, and the silence in the room was almost palpable. Marcos and Anna exchanged looks of surprise and a little frustration. They had imagined a simpler process, where they could divide the assets without further ado. Julia, on the other hand, felt a mixture of apprehension and understanding. She knew that Dona Isidora had always valued integrity, and it was now clear that her mother wanted to ensure that her children were worthy of their inheritance. Mr. Pedro went on to explain the details of the challenges. Each of you will have to face 2 distinct challenges. The first challenge will be a test of courage and wisdom, and the second, a test of compassion and generosity. Only those who successfully overcome these challenges will be able to claim the legacy that I left. The revelation of the challenges left the siblings silent. Marcos began to question the idea, frustrated by the difficulty of the task. Anna analyzed the words carefully, already trying to formulate strategies. Julia remained silent, but her gaze showed calm determination. From that moment on, Dona Isidora's mansion became a testing ground. The siblings knew that they could not simply wait for everything to resolve itself. They would have to show who they really were and face the test prepared by their mother with courage and sincerity. The story was about to unfold with new challenges and discoveries, and Marcos, Anna and Julia's journey to prove their true worth was just beginning. When Mr. Pedro finished reading the words of the will, the room filled with murmurs and whispers. Marcos, always the most impulsive, immediately began to pace back and forth, his mind working a mile a minute. He tapped his hand on his leg, clearly agitated. "But this doesn't make sense," he exclaimed. "How is a challenge going to decide who deserves the inheritance? This is just a game." Anna, the sister who always sought rational solutions, tried to remain calm, but her face was etched with concern. She adjusted her glasses and began to ponder the lawyer's words. "We must analyze every detail," she said, more to herself than to the others. "If these challenges are really the only way to win the inheritance, then we need to understand what is involved and how we can best approach them." While Marcos and Anna were drowning in worries and questions, Julia remained silent, observing her siblings with a serene expression. She did not seem disturbed by the news. On the contrary, her calm was almost palpable. Sitting in a velvet armchair, her eyes shone with a quiet determination. She had always been the most thoughtful of the 3, and now her posture reflected a deep understanding of Dona Isidora's intentions. "Maybe Mom wanted more than just dividing the assets," Julia said softly, without raising her voice. "She wanted to see if we are capable of facing these trials with dignity and respect. It's not just about gaining the inheritance, but about demonstrating who we really are." Marcos shook his head, still skeptical. "But what if these challenges are impossible? What if they are just a way to make us fail?" Anna tried to calculate the possibilities, looking at the words in the will as if hoping to find some hidden clue. "We need to understand the rules and prepare ourselves. If we want to have any chance, we need to be meticulous." Julia stood up and went to the window, looking at the lush garden that stretched out beyond the house. She thought about the memories she had with her mother, the values that Dona Isidora had always tried to teach them. Taking a deep breath, Julia turned to her siblings and said, "I know this is difficult, but I believe we can overcome any challenge if we work together and act with integrity." Her words brought a moment of reflection. Marcos and Anna, although still uneasy, began to realize that Julia's attitude was in line with the spirit of the will. The challenge was not only a test of their practical skills, but a chance to show what they had learned over the years. The sun began to set, casting a golden light over the mansion, and the siblings, despite their worries, felt that they were on the verge of a new journey. Julia was willing to face the challenges with an open heart and a focused mind, while Marcos and Anna began to understand that the true test would be much more than a simple competition. It would be a lesson in who they were as people. As night approached, the 3 prepared for what was to come, each with their own hopes and fears. The story was about to unfold, and the challenges proposed by Dona Isidora promised to test not only their skills, but their souls. Night fell over the mansion, and the atmosphere was charged with tension. The first challenge had been announced, and the brothers were about to face it. Mr. Pedro led them to a part of the house that few knew about, an old storage room hidden at the end of the hallway. The room was shrouded in shadows, with only the light of a flickering lantern illuminating the space. Upon entering, the brothers found 3 boxes arranged on a central table. Each box was a different size and shape, made of dark, polished wood. The boxes were lined up in an orderly fashion, but what lay inside them was a dangerous mystery. The room was filled with the scent of aged wood and dust, which only added to the air of mystery and unease. The challenge was clear. Each of the brothers would have to choose a box. Inside one of them was a golden key, the key to the next step of the test. Inside another was a poisonous scorpion, and inside the third a dangerous snake. The danger lurking in each box was real and tangible, and each choice could mean the difference between success and failure. Mark, the more fiery mind, and Anna, the analytical one, began to feel a wave of desperation and frustration. They were determined to find a way to ensure that Julia, the calmer and more centered sister, would not be able to choose the right box. If they could manipulate the situation, they believed they could secure the inheritance for themselves without going through the dangers of the challenges. Anna, with an expression of concentration, whispered to Mark as they watched the room's foreman, an elderly, stern-looking man who was there to oversee the challenge. "If we can convince him to help us, maybe we can get Julia to choose the wrong box. We need a plan." Mark nodded, his eyes shining with a mixture of anger and cunning. "We'll bribe him. If we give him a portion of what we inherit, he can get Julia to choose the box with the scorpion or the snake." With this in mind, Mark and Anna discreetly approached the foreman. In a dark corner of the room, where the light from the flashlight couldn't reach, Marcos took a small bag of money from his pocket and offered it to the man. "Look, we know you're just doing your job, but we can make this easier for all of us. If you help us, we guarantee you'll get a generous share of the inheritance." The man looked at the money and then at the brothers with a doubtful expression. He seemed to be considering the proposal, but his gaze also revealed a mixture of hesitation and ethics. "This isn't right," he muttered. "This challenge is about showing who we really are." Meanwhile, Julia watched from afar, unaware of what was happening. Her mind was focused on the challenge ahead, unaware of the attempted manipulation that was unfolding around her. However, fate had other plans. Mr. Pedro, who had been informed of possible attempts at deception, was alert and prepared. He decided to closely monitor the brothers' movements, and soon, one of the mansion's security assistants entered the room discreetly. With a shrewd eye, the assistant captured the scene on video. When the person in charge saw the security assistant approach and the camera start recording, he felt that the risk of being caught was too high. With a resigned sigh, he refused the bribe. "I can't do that," he said, handing the money back to Marcos and Anna. "The challenge must be fair." The attempt at deception was foiled, and the siblings were left to face the challenge without further trickery. Marcos and Anna turned to Julia, their plans foiled, while Julia prepared to choose a box, unaware of what was coming. The tension in the room grew, and the real test was about to begin. The story of how Julia would face the challenge and how Marcos and Anna would deal with the consequences of the attempted manipulation was only just beginning, and everyone's journey was about to unfold in a series of exciting and revealing events. As Marcos and Anna attempted to manipulate the challenge, the room was filled with increasing tension. The person in charge, after hesitating, had finally refused the bribe and decided to maintain the integrity of the challenge. However, what the siblings did not know was that the mansion was under closer surveillance than they had imagined. Mr. Pedro, Dona Isidora's lawyer, and Mr. Fabio, a close family friend, had taken special precautions to ensure that the competition was fair. Both were aware of the nature of the trials and knew that the temptation to cheat might arise. Thus, they had discreetly installed security cameras in the storage room to ensure that no irregularities went unnoticed. While Marcos and Anna continued to scheme, Mr. Pedro and Mr. Fabio watched the events unfold on a monitor located in the control room, a small dark room filled with electronic equipment and screens. The monitor displayed clear images of the action in the challenge room, capturing every movement and every conversation. When Marcos offered the money to the foreman and tried to bribe him, the camera clearly captured the moment when the elderly man looked at the money with an expression of surprise and then refused the offer. Mr. Pedro, with a grave expression, looked at Mr. Fabio and made a silent gesture. It was time to act. "We need to stop this before it's too late," Mr. Pedro said, his voice firm and resolute. He picked up the communication microphone and began speaking. "Ladies and gentlemen, please stop the challenge immediately." Mr. Pedro's voice echoed through the room's speakers, breaking the tense silence. Marcos and Anna looked around, confused and alarmed. Julia, who was preparing to choose a box, turned to see what was happening. Mr. Fabio entered the room with an expression of authority. With a calm gesture, he asked Marcos and Anna to come closer to the table. "We have some matters to discuss," he said, his voice deep and assured. "There is clear evidence that they attempted to bribe the person in charge to manipulate the outcome of this challenge." The siblings, now pale and nervous, tried to protest, but the evidence was irrefutable. Mr. Pedro played the camera footage, clearly showing Marcos and Anna offering money to the manager and discussing the deception plan. The images were clear and incredibly detailed, revealing every step of the attempted manipulation. "As you can see," Mr. Pedro continued, "the challenge must be conducted with complete honesty. Any attempt at cheating will be punished." Marcos and Anna tried to defend themselves, but the gravity of the situation was clear. They knew they had been caught and that their attempt at manipulation had been unmasked. The shame and frustration were visible on their faces. Julia, who had watched the entire situation with a mixture of relief and concern, felt a weight lifted from her shoulders. She knew that the challenge had to be fair, and that her actions would have a profound impact on the resolution of the inheritance. The interruption brought temporary relief, but it also left the room with a sense of anticipation about what would come next. "Marcos, Anna," Mr. Fabio said firmly, "you will have to face the consequences of your actions. The attempted deception has compromised your participation in the challenge." The decision had been made. Marcos and Anna were excluded from the competition, and Julia, now alone, prepared to face the challenge with a new understanding of the importance of integrity. The story was far from over, and the true test of Julia's character was about to begin. With the room now silent, everyone knew that the next step would be crucial, and Julia's journey to prove her worth had only just begun. Tension and anticipation were in the air, and the story would continue to unfold with new challenges and exciting revelations. The room was enveloped in a tense silence. Everyone's eyes were on Mr. Pedro and Mr. Fabio, who had just exposed Marcos and Anna's attempted deception. The atmosphere was heavy with the weight of the decision that was about to be announced. Marcos and Anna were visibly shaken, their faces pale and their hands shaking. Shame and frustration were written all over their faces. Mr. Pedro, with a firm and resolute expression, gestured for them to approach the table where the challenge had been held. "Marcos and Anna," Mr. Pedro began in a grave voice, "you have been caught trying to manipulate the challenge. Integrity and honesty were essential requirements for this process, and as a result of your dishonest actions, you are excluded from the inheritance." Mr. Pedro's words echoed in the room, and the siblings felt the impact of his decision. Disappointment was visible in their eyes, and the reality of their actions finally began to set in. Anna, with tears beginning to form, looked at Julia with an expression of regret and despair. Marcos, with his shoulders slumped, tried to find words, but none seemed adequate. Meanwhile, Julia was the center of all attention. She had demonstrated courage and integrity in facing the challenge, and now she was about to receive recognition for her honesty. But despite her triumph, there was a sadness in her eyes. She knew that her brother's exclusion was a painful consequence, and she wanted her victory to be accompanied by an act of true kindness. With a dignified demeanor, Julia approached Marcos and Anna. Her gaze was soft, but filled with deep understanding. "I understand that you made a mistake," she said in a calm, composed voice. "And I know that you may have acted out of desperation. Despite everything, I believe that we all deserve a chance at redemption." She then made a proposal that surprised everyone in the room. "I would like to offer you 1 year to show that you can change. 1 year to prove that you are capable of acting with honesty and integrity. If you use this time to demonstrate a genuine change in your attitudes, I will be willing to reconsider the possibility of giving you another chance." Julia's gesture was met with a mixture of surprise and relief. Marcos and Anna, although still affected by their exclusion, felt a ray of hope emerge from their frustration. Julia's generosity offered them an opportunity to redeem themselves and prove their worth. Marcos, with a voice full of gratitude and a touch of hope, responded, "Thank you, Julia. We don't know what to say, but we appreciate your offer and promise that we will do our best to change." Anna, with tears in her eyes, also expressed her gratitude. "Let's use this time to work on ourselves and show that we are capable of learning from our mistakes." Mr. Pedro and Mr. Fabio watched with a mixture of respect and approval. Julia's gesture not only demonstrated her kindness, but also aligned with the values that Dona Isidora had wanted to promote through her challenges. With the decision made and Julia's gesture sealed, the room began to empty. Marcos and Anna left with a sense of renewed determination, while Julia returned to the main room, reflecting on the importance of compassion and justice. She knew that the journey was far from over, but she felt that she had taken a significant step towards making a difference. The future was now before everyone, full of possibilities and challenges, and the story would continue to unfold with new lessons and opportunities to grow. Marcos was determined to seize the chance that Julia offered him. Julia's decision to give him and Anna a year to prove that they could change was an unexpected and precious gift, and Marcos knew he needed to show concrete results. He was determined to change his life and make the most of this opportunity. Soon after the decision, Marcos approached Julia and expressed his desire to start working on the social projects that she had led. Julia, who was relieved and hopeful about Marcos's new attitude, agreed to include him in her efforts. Marcos began his new path with renewed energy and determination. He became deeply involved in several projects that Julia had created to help the local community. Among the projects were mentoring programs for vulnerable youth, food collection for needy families, and rehabilitation of degraded urban areas. In the beginning, Marcos encountered challenges. He dealt with physical and emotional exhaustion, faced resistance, and had to learn how to connect with people in a genuine way. Each day was a new lesson in empathy and hard work. But instead of becoming discouraged, Marcos used these challenges as opportunities to grow. He began to understand the true value of community service and the importance of serving others. For one project, Marcos was assigned to help restore a local park that had been neglected. The park was a special place for many children in the community, but it was littered and in disrepair. Marcos spent hours, days, and weeks working side by side with volunteers, cleaning the park, fixing broken toys, and planting new trees. He was involved in every detail, from painting benches to installing new playground equipment. As Marcos worked, he began to connect with the people he helped. He met many of the families and children who frequented the park. Their stories and personal challenges touched Marcos's heart and made him realize the real impact of his work. He saw the smiles on the children's faces as they played in the renovated park, and it brought him a sense of accomplishment and purpose he had never experienced before.